I've got a yard full of sticks. I've got this metal thing called the biochar kiln. And I just have one question. Can I actually turn this into something useful for my garden? I'm Cameron, welcome back to the Busy Gardener channel. I keep hearing about biochar, how it's good for water retention, for soil aeration, for microbial activity, but I've never actually made it. So today I'm gonna give it a shot. My first time, no guarantees this is even gonna work. So stick around and see if we can actually turn these sticks into this biochar to go right into the garden. Let's get busy. So what is biochar? It's basically like charcoal for your soil. When you burn wood in a low oxygen environment, it creates a very porous carbon-based material that ends up being amazing for garden beds. All those tiny pores create a place for water to go, for nutrients to go, and a place for those plants' roots to grow. So it's kind of like a little 5-star resort for those plant roots. So these pieces of what look like charcoal are just kind of accidental. We had a fire in our fire pit and most of it burned down into ash, which is just fully gone. There's no combustible ability left in it. But this charcoal ends up being able to be burned. It's almost pure carbon. By burning wood in a controlled environment like the biochar kiln, it's going to make it so that we end up with mostly biochar instead of a bunch of ash. Sounds too easy, right? It might be. We're gonna give this a shot, start setting some things on fire to see if we can actually create some of this stuff intentionally. A bunch of wood got knocked down by a windstorm in our neighborhood, so collecting that is gonna give us a good start for our supply. Okay, here's the setup. I've got this Moki stainless steel biochar kiln, and it's supposed to make a super clean burn and make it so that way we're able to just end up with a ton of biochar at the bottom as we build this up by adding more and more material. So we're either gonna end up with a bunch of biochar or just a big smoky mess. This is being done on just some bare earth right here, so that way whatever burns at the bottom doesn't remain flammable. I don't wanna put it on wood chips or on my deck where I don't mind there being a bunch of dark mess. I started this kind of like I would a regular campfire with some starter material at the bottom, some cardboard, and I break using this amazing thing for smaller kindling. And I don't pack it on as tight as I will. I just want to get the flames going before I start packing on the fuel. One of the things that's nice about this on a cool rainy day, drizzly day like this is it's actually cozy. I'm getting to enjoy a campfire while we're making this biochar. Right now we're waiting for all of this to turn into some coals, and the minute it starts turning into coals and we start seeing some white ash begin to develop, I guess that's where we start putting some more wood on top. Normally that's bad news because with a regular fire you want as much oxygen to be flowing through there as possible, but what we're trying to do is to smother it and to continually smother it so that we end up with just a layer upon layer upon layer of biochar instead of just ash. So we're trying to keep it from burning all the way through. But first we need these nice hot coals so we can put larger pieces on there to smother it. One of the things as I understand it about the shape of this kiln is this cone shape makes it so this ends up becoming a really clean burn. A lot of times fires will draw air from the bottom, but this creates these kind of vortices that come in over the top. And as you can see, it's really clean burn. There's not a lot of smoke. And so this is pretty cool. Glad to see it's working out. I'm starting to see some of the white edges appear on the wood, which means that's beginning to turn to ash, and that's where we want to take and start adding some more material, another layer to the top of this. So that way it starts to smother. As those things break down into slightly more embers and coals, that's going to hopefully, this is all going to start to kind of compress and condense on itself. You can actually see that when we did that, it started to smother it over here. There's not as much fire coming through. So we're just gonna wait for the heat now to do the rest of the burning. Once you get biochar, if you were to take this and throw it straight into the garden, you'd have a problem. Remember I said this thing is just like a sponge with all those holes? If you put it straight into your garden, it actually can suck nutrients out of the soil instead of adding it. So you need to do something called inoculating it. And that's where you're putting nutrients into the biochar so that way it's got something available to give to the plants instead of to take away from them. The way I'm going to inoculate it is with IV Organics fertilizer. This stuff's amazing. So I'm going to put some of that in this bucket. I'm going to put water in here and create kind of a fertilizer soup. And then I'm going to take the biochar once we have it and put it in there so that way you can soak that up over the course of a couple of days. Okay, as I'm looking down here, I noticed that there was some fire still at the bottom. And when I looked around the side, I see that there's some flame licking up. So that means air is getting underneath. So I'm gonna use this to just mound some dirt around the side to try to make this a little bit more airtight at the bottom. So I'm just gonna dig a little bit of dirt and just kind of create a little dam around the edges of this to seal it in. Because I want that stuff at the bottom to be starved of oxygen. Otherwise, we're gonna pull this stuff up and it's just gonna be a bunch of ash. I think what I'm finding out is that I think these pieces are just too big. I think they're really cutting them down into almost like stick size or twig size instead of these planks, because it seems like the outside is starting to now, I don't even want to say char, but they're starting to ash up, but the inside is still totally intact. I can't imagine that the very inside of this large chunk right here is, is not still just pretty raw if I cut it open. And so I think the ticket to this is making sure you've got small enough pieces so that way you can just put more and more material on there. As it starts to char over, you know that it's all the way through instead of having some large chunk with a big cross section. All right, as I'm looking here, I see that we've got some ash happening. And when I hit a couple of these, they actually broke apart pretty well. So I'm thinking that it might have already gone through and burned up a bunch of that. So now comes the fun part. Now we have to rapidly douse this so that it doesn't all just turn to ash. Here's the moment of truth. Coming over, let's see if we did it. Everything on the outside looks really good, looks nice and charred. As we smash this up, if we're getting chunks like this, we're gonna be golden. A lot of it is. I was worried about some of these bigger pieces. So this is essentially incomplete combustion. So we've got some larger chunks like this one that don't look like they've got fully charred. They're kind of at the outer edges. That one doesn't really look like it. So we'll take those out, but a lot of these larger ones totally turn into this biochar. So I would call this a success. So this step is to take all of this beautiful biochar, put it in our inoculant, this fertilizer, let it sit here for a few days. I'm going to be taking and testing this in some pots. I'm going to be doing some side-by-side tests. I'm going to make a video of that, so you should subscribe so that way you don't miss it. And we're going to see if biochar actually makes a difference. We'll do something with no biochar in it, with a little bit of biochar, all the way up to see where the sweet spot is before we start putting it in our garden. I'm going to keep hacking off the charcoal off of the unburned pieces. And whether you've got one experiment you've got going on in your garden, 500. Till next time, stay busy.